Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another Havoc Sons video. Today, what I have for you is a very unusual little situation. When I was driving by the old Highway 56, I thought I saw gravestones. So I started asking around, and a couple of people in this area told me that yes, that there was an abandoned cemetery somewhere back in these foothills. So I'm looking through everything to try to find any hope of acquiring this lost cemetery. I talked to a few neighbors and I was told that it could be back behind the church, that at one time in the early mid 1800s, the church was connected to this cemetery. So I am now on a quest to look for this church. And then from there, maybe I can find the cemetery. This road seems to be a utility road that goes into what looks like a control unit for petroleum, which is unusual to have petroleum tanks here. I don't see anything else other than just this stop off point where the road ends. And then I see these signs here that talk about a petroleum warning. I guess you don't want to dig here. There's petroleum pipes down below. And it shows where they start, and then the second one shows where they finish. So I don't think it's over here. Let me try this back trail. I think we might have something in the back trail area. Now, just above this hill and over to the left is Rancho Penasquitas. To the right, and a little north of where I'm walking, is Solana Beach. And next to that, just over these trees, is Del Mar. This trail doesn't look very promising. I got a fork in the road. I'm going to take the high road. From what I have been able to gather, this cemetery is no longer in use currently, so it is abandoned. And it was used by the early settlers. Well, it looks like this is just another utility road, and it looks like people have made it a little play area for bikes up and down hills. So let me try down in here in this ravine. Looks like there's a trail that heads down this way. I know that I'm close because I did distinctly see tombstones from the freeway. Well, this looks like a dead end. Looks like it just goes into a little place to get away from the world. Unfortunately, it's got a trail that walks right to it. So let me try somewhere else. As you can see from the signs that are to the right, that's Highway 56. And those long fences up above, I believe that is a parking lot for the church that I'm looking for. And yeah, there's a steeple right up over there. So I think I'm going to head up that way. Well, I can't go this way because it's got a locked fence. So let me try up around the front. I'm sure that there's a parking lot for that church. So let me try something over there. Go up that. I guess what I'll do is I'll just come back up out of this road, try to find the parking lot for the church, and see if the cemetery is behind the parking lot. Climbing up on the high ground and looking around, it does look like to the left there is a parking lot. And wouldn't you know, I found it. So here's the church. And I was told by someone walking by that there is a cemetery in the back. The cemetery is located on the south side of the church in a ravine that is between Highway 56 and this church. Many Mexican Americans who settled in nearby Eden Gardens, an agricultural area in South Solana Beach, obtained plots for their families, as well as others who worked in the valley for the sisters and early settlers. Area pioneer Catholics and Protestants were buried on the opposite side of the 1.5 acre cemetery, divided by a cleft in the hillside. According to records kept at the Catholic Diocese of San Diego, Mother M. Michael Cummings donated the cemetery and an adjacent 10-acre plot in 1894 to Most Reverend Bishop George Montgomery of Los Angeles in 1937. Most Reverend Bishop Buddy obtained a transfer of the deed to that property from the Los Angeles Diocese. The cemetery was part of a 1,000-acre plot owned by the Sisters of Mercy, who ran St. Joseph's Hospital and Sanitarium, now known as Mercy Hospital in San Diego, which still exists today. The Sisters of Mercy arrived in San Diego from San Francisco in 1890 and eventually acquired the land from the Magnolia family, who were Irish settlers and the first Anglos to settle in the valley. They homesteaded 2,040 acres in the area in the late 1800s. What I'm reading off of this plaque here. The Magnolias were unable to pay a $4,000 back due mortgage on their land, so they offered the Sisters of Mercy 1,000 acres in return for enough money to clear the mortgage. When the Magnolias passed away, they were buried in the cemetery marked with a wooden cross, but the cross was destroyed with no record exacting their burial site. So in the whole cemetery, you'll have no idea where the Magnolias are buried, even though they were the founders of the valley and basically the cemetery. In the early 1900s, the sisters built a 3-story Victorian house on the land they called Mount Carmel Ranch, adjacent to the cemetery. During World War I, the ranch was used as a home for neglected children. Funded through donations to the sisters, the nuns also raised vegetables, primarily beans and dairy cattle, on 300 acres of the ranch. And the money this brought in was used to build a surgical wing at the San Diego Hospital in 1919. A group of investors thought there might be oil on the property, and the sisters agreed to allow drilling, including on the cemetery plot, for which they would receive 12.5% of the oil. However, the oil venture never materialized, and the sisters continued their farming. The nuns were given permission to sell the land in 1935 for a minimum of $100,000. 3 years later, the state of California indicated it was interested in buying the land for a state prison, but political considerations interfered and the land was passed over for one in Chino. Eventually, the sisters were able to sell all but 10.69 acres of the ranch. This land is controlled by the Catholic Diocese of San Diego and maintained by St. William of York Church, now renamed St. Teresa of Carmel. Over the years, the burial ground has been subject to an increase in vandalism as the area's population grew and more people became aware of the cemetery. Additionally, there were cattle that grazed there, along with brush fires that destroyed the hand carved wood crosses, the headstones crudely molded from clay, rocks, and seashells. The past several years has not seen any vandalism. The Knights of Columbus Council has maintained the cemetery grounds since 2006. Although it is under the jurisdiction of the Holy Cross Cemetery, despite its small size, the cemetery, which also has been called the Del Mar Cemetery, has a long, colorful history. The cemetery has 83 recorded burials, according to the Death Register book kept at St. James Catholic Church in Del Mar, but the number of interments is probably well over 100 because burials at the turn of the century may not have been recorded. The last recorded burial occurred in 1980. No one seems to know where the non-Catholic burials were recorded. The first recorded burial was Juana Raquia on Valentine's Day 1919, who died of old age, according to church records. Since then, there have been no more than 7 burials in any 1 year and no burials in the 17 of the years between 1919 and 1980. The earliest burials date still legible on the gravestones is in the Protestant section of the cemetery, which is at the extreme east side of the cemetery grounds, is for Caroline and Nyman, 1839 to 1899. Her husband, Martin Nyman, 1833 to 1908, lies nearby under a matching marker. Both headstones look almost new. Other early stones bear the name Nichols, Switzer, and Sawyer. The Nichols family were pioneers in the valley. The Nymans, Switzer, and Sawyers were also longtime residents in the area. There is a concrete marker that had an inscription on a metal plate which is no longer legible. The two names were recorded on the plate, which reads Miles and Virginia Standish, whose deaths were in 1956 and 1957. There is legend that these were descendants of the Miles Standish, who was chosen captain or defender of the colony of New Plymouth in 1621. The family had a farm that was located just south of Del Mar, west of Interstate 5. The Standish family is known to have come from Montana before settling here. In June 1995, Miss Terry Renteria, who at the time was the mayor of Solana Beach, and whose sister Josephine Renteria, 1/22/1931 to 7/29/1938, is buried in the cemetery, wrote to the San Diego Catholic Diocese in an effort to have the cemetery declared a State of California historical site. This was promulgated by the construction of housing, basically denied. Commercial buildings, the vandalism that was occurring at the cemetery, and the proposed Highway 56 construction. To our knowledge, even to this day, in all my research and all the people I've talked to, nothing has become of this, and it is still not an historical landmark. A recent survey of the cemetery completed on March 18, 2006, by one of the members of the Knights of Columbus Council revealed that of the recorded graves, known and unknown, there are only 45 sites where a known grave exists, either with a name or the marker, a marker where a name is illegible, or there is no identification whatsoever on the Catholic side of the cemetery. On the Protestant side, there are 11 sites, of which only one is unknown, and the third is the Standish headstone, of which is mentioned before. The plate is now illegible. The names on the plate were legible back in 1985, but weather has since worn away the Standish names. Since that date of the recent 2006 survey, 4 more graves have been found through semi-annual Knights of Columbus maintenance program of the cemetery, which are nothing more than indentations in the ground without any hint of identifications. Rocks have been placed on those sites as markers. I have found this cemetery to be very interesting for the simple reason that here you have early settlers of the North County of San Diego. This is the Miles Standish marker that I discussed earlier, where the names are no longer legible on the metal plate. This side of the cemetery is the Protestant side. And have all the Protestants buried here, like I said earlier. Only 11 have been acknowledged. My feelings is that maybe because the majority of the people buried here are Mexican American, that there is not a huge push to make this a historical landmark. And that's just a crying shame. Because to be honest with you, this whole area of Southern California was at one time Mexico. And if it wasn't for the early Mexican settlers, we really wouldn't have this beautiful area that we have today. I think it's a shame, and something should be done to make this cemetery a historical landmark. I've been looking for this cemetery for quite some time, and I'm very happy to have finally found it. It seems that time has forgotten, but there are still some people that refuse to allow history to forget. They maintain the cemetery to the best of their ability, and it is really quite a beautiful place to visit. If you're in the area, I would suggest that you come on down. This is now called the Notre Dame Academy in Del Mar. And just pull into the parking lot, walk behind the church, take the stairways down to the cemetery, and go back in time. I wish that there was something more that I could do, but finding this cemetery as I have, I think that alone gives this, for me at least, a win. I'm not sure, but if the Catholic Church had not adopted that site above the cemetery, that this cemetery wouldn't even exist today. It is so close to Highway 56, as you can see. It borders up on it. I mean, this reminds me of something else very similar in Old Town San Diego, where actual grave sites were denoted by brass markers or underneath roads, thoroughways that you pass by with cars constantly. I'm sure that this is probably the case here. I was wondering that maybe up along the top of that hill, there might have been more. According to the register, and like I said earlier, that's just what was recorded. There's over 80 plots in a 1.5 acre cemetery, which means there has to be a lot of graves here. And probably half or less than half are even known, nothing other than those over there are acknowledgeable or even found. But it also looks like there's been more surveying going on here. Here's an old surveyor marker. So it looks like there's a lot going on still to this day. Well, hey, thanks for watching. Have a great day and a better life. Remember, do more of what makes you happy. See ya.